Hello, welcome to another recap for the models over at paydirt.ghost.io. My name is James McCool. I am the model builder and model runner and main guy over there, doing some recap videos every day to show the results of all the models that were active and doing things for subscribers yesterday. Yesterday there was no NHL slate, so it was just basketball for the most part. There was also a 2-game League of Legends slate, of which was not super hard to figure out. I would usually do a recap of the League of Legends model, but on a 2-game slate where we were on the favorites, it's just kind of like you played the favorites. And so there's not really much more to break down on that. There's some strategy that kind of goes into how you would approach that League of Legends slate. I had mentioned a couple times that it might be a good idea to stack the underdogs, that it might be a good idea to be super different, do something weird, but for the most part with League of Legends, you have to be on the favorites and you have to be on the winners, so it's not really that big of a deal to be on the winners. So I'm not going to break down that model. I am going to break down the NBA models, though. I'll break down the matchups model, the DEM sheets, as well as the range of outcomes, which both performed well, with some letdowns for sure, but we'll get into that here in a second. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. We'll start with the defensive efficiency matchup sheet first, as we usually do. The top 5 plays were Kendrick Nunn, D'Angelo Russell, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Royce O'Neal, and Joel Embiid. A little bit of an asterisk next to Giannis's name here, and we'll get into him for sure. But Kendrick Nunn, we'll start with him. 21 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1 steal. He ended up doing pretty well. It wasn't a world-shattering performance, but it was definitely good enough to get him, value. I think he was like mid 5K yesterday or something like that. Put up around 30 fantasy points. So 33 fantasy points definitely will play from him. That was good. And then you can see that Ricky Rubio was the next point guard on the list, ended up putting up like 10x or something. I think 62 fantasy points against Utah. The Suns put up 133 real life points against that team. So, Ricky Rubio absolutely crushed that price tag. I know that some people were higher on him than I was. They were definitely higher on him than the range of outcomes numbers were, but that's okay. That's why we have the DM sheets as well, is to find these kind of weird ones that don't really make too much sense, but might have an opportunity to absolutely go off. D'Angelo Russell for shooting guard put up 29 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, and 1 steal. Projection that I had for him was assuming more assists, I think. I talked a lot in Discord yesterday about that situation with Minnesota and Dallas, and if you're going to be playing D'Angelo Russell with Malik Beasley, you should be game stacking that game, because the only way that both Russell and Beasley get there is if Russell has a whole bunch of assists and Malik Beasley has a whole bunch of points and they both go off, and if they're both going off, then Dallas is probably having to do things. So, that logic, I had a stack like that, but D'Angelo Russell did not get the assist that he needed to get. That game turned out to be kind of a weird little dud type thing. Neither Luka nor Kristaps went off, which was not the most surprising thing of the night, but up there, which is something to say. So D'Angelo Russell had a good performance, put up 42 fantasy points. He was mid 8K, so not terrible, but not great. He was low owned, and if he'd have gone off, then things would have been way better for the Discord. Bradley Beal was the second shooting guard on the list and did great. I think he put up 61 fantasy points up against Milwaukee. It was a good game. But we're going to get into Giannis. I actually game stacked that game last night with Milwaukee and Washington, hoping that Washington would keep up, knowing that Bradley Beal would be the reason why they kept up if they did. And it was actually Giannis that ended up being a disappointment. So we'll move on to him. He had 22 points, 14 rebounds, and 2 assists with 1 block. He was in foul trouble most of the game, so he wasn't being aggressive. It was Chris Middleton that ended up getting the huge boost here as the small forward, or really as the wing, right? So Chris Middleton put up 40 real-life points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals. Ended up stealing the show away from Giannis here, who was in foul trouble for a majority of the game. If you ended up going with a Washington stack that was Bradley Beal, Moritz Wagner, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Chris Middleton, if you could afford that, you would have had to fade Joel Embiid or fade Luka Doncic or something like that. But you probably could have done it and ended up really well, but Giannis would have let you down, like he let down a lot of us in the Discord over at the site. So Giannis, a bit of a disappointment here. Tim Hardaway Jr. did great. He put up plenty of points. I think that Kevin Porter also did fantastic. I think he put up 51 fantasy points or something like that, like 11x. Just absolutely crushed it. Royce O'Neal for power forward had 5 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals. Okay performance, not bad. He was cheap, so he ended up putting up value. Al Horford was the secondary power forward in this model, and then Bam Adebayo the third. So all three of those guys ended up doing at least well. Bam Adebayo crushed his price tag, put up another 60-plus fantasy points. So he's somebody that I always like using him when he's going to be low owned. Moving on to center, Joel Embiid had a career night, 49 real-life points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, and 1 block. He was 56% owned. If you didn't have him, it was pretty hard to cash. And then Jonas Valanciunas. Jonas Valanciunas did okay. He didn't do great, but it was actually Gogai Dieng that ended up doing really well for this center boost, playing extended minutes because of injuries to Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson Jr. He put up 39 fantasy points at, I think, $3,900 or something like that. Maybe cheaper. He might have been like $3,400. But center definitely worked out pretty well. So the miss here was obviously Giannis, with D'Angelo Russell and Royce O'Neal both being good but not incredible. Kendrick Nunn and Joel Embiid doing well. It was hard to cash last night without the absolute chalk nuts. I put up 330 something in GPPs and did not make that much money on that. So kind of a frustrating night, but we've run into that a lot in NBA season, and hopefully we end up binking when the chalk is not just absolutely destructive. So we'll move on to the range of outcomes model now. As usual, I'll do DraftKings, which is the site that I mostly play on. Top 20, let's see, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 great performances, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 good performances. So out of the top 20, 14 were good or great performances with just one bad performance. So we'll kind of go down the list here. Gogai Dieng, as I mentioned, put up 38 fantasy points. He was only 3,400. Obviously a fantastic performance from him. Al Horford only put up 26.5. It was good. He was only 4,500. That's value. That's fine. That's 5x, especially at high ownership. That'll play. But he wasn't going to be really winning you any tournaments, which is a bit of a bummer. Dennis Smith Jr. put up 44 fantasy points. He had 7 steals, so great performance from him for only 3,300 and at excessively heavy chalk. Joel Embiid put up 79. Again, 50% owned. Like, you're not gaining anything by having Joel Embiid last night in tournaments. Luka Doncic, only 46.75. Mad performance from him. I mean, obviously, so in the Discord, so many screenshots of just like, here's either Luka Doncic or Giannis Antetokounmpo just like shattering dreams and preventing very large cash lines. So it's a bit of a bummer, of course. Kelly Olynyk, 20.25 fantasy points. Not a bad performance. He was in foul trouble to start the game. And then ended up like not playing the rest of the half, I think, and then salvaged in the second half. So 3,700, putting up 20 fantasy points. That's fine. That'll play. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 42 fantasy points. I'm annoyed about it. We will move on. Taurean Prince, 19 fantasy points. That is a meh performance. He started out pretty well, like not terribly, but he just couldn't put up enough shots, and he was not getting the volume necessary. Feel like kind of like Karis LeVert has kind of broken up that Brooklyn team a little bit, and it's hard to figure out who's going to be the scorer. They just have so many guys that can kind of ball hog a little bit between Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert and Taurean Prince, and these guys that if they feel like they have the hot hand, they'll just take a whole bunch of shots. and it's usually fine. But you kind of got to guess on which Brooklyn guy is going to do well. Danielle House put up 26.25 fantasy points. That is a fine performance there, nearly 7x from him. So pretty happy about that. He ended up jumping once Russell Westbrook was ruled out, and I reran all the models after lock on DraftKings to make sure that people had the best info there. And Danielle House definitely jumped. Eric Gordon jumped as well. He got injured in the fourth quarter, but did end up putting up 22 fantasy points, which is fine. That's not great, but it's good. D'Angelo Russell, as I mentioned in the DEM sheets, he put up 42.75. It was good, not great. He was mid 8K. Moritz Wagner put up 28 fantasy points at just 4K. That's fantastic. 7X, totally into that. He jumped as soon as Bertans and those guys were ruled out. Chris Middleton, for 59 fantasy points. So he was fantastic. If you faded Giannis and played Chris Middleton instead, you were sitting real pretty last night. Naz Reid at 6K had another bad game, 2 in a row now. He's going to be an inconsistent player, I think, but his ceiling is very, very good. We're going to have a buy low window on him after 2 bad performances at him being relatively owned. So keep a lookout for Naz Reid in the range of outcome sheets. His ownership should be lower than it deserves moving forward. Robin Lopez, only 3K, put up 23.25. Pretty damn good. Talked about that game stack with Milwaukee and Washington. He was a piece of it with Giannis. Then Malik Beasley put up 29.5. Good, not great, just about 5x. Like I mentioned with D'Angelo Russell in that game stack situation, if Russell has more assists, I think they go to Beasley. And Beasley did not get those assists, did not convert them into points, so he had an okay game, as did D'Angelo Russell. Kristaps Porzingis, 31.25, super meh performance, just like borderline bad performance. He put up just about 4x, so that is like what I consider a meh performance. Him and Luka just did not put up a whole bunch of points, which was disappointing. Josh Richardson put up 27 fantasy points. Good. He was really high owned, so it doesn't really matter. He put up 5x, which is fine. Dorian Finney-Smith, this is the only bad performance of the night. He only put up 13 fantasy points. He's had kind of a cold stretch here, but he definitely has 45 fantasy point upside. So he kind of looks like Aaron Gordon right now to me from a fantasy point perspective, just somebody that you need to keep an eye on for ownership and in the right spots. And then Julius Randle put up 38 fantasy points, which was okay. That's fine. He didn't play the fourth. So if he would have played the fourth, he probably would have put up 45, 46 fantasy points, been kind of a smash play. No, a couple smart guys in the industry just missed out on, a really, really big cash out from him. So, good. Pretty good from the range of outcomes model last night. Ended up with 14 good or great performances. That'll definitely play. We were like a coin flip away from crushing the slate last night in the Discord and with all the models. So we're almost there. We should have one by the end of the season. I'm hoping for a sub to hit 5K, or not 5K, 5 figures before the end of the season. So pretty good, not bad. Let's move on and crush out the slates for today.